the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A state of control.
This is A State of Control, episode number 2, recorded Monday, March 18th, 2013. Tear down these walls. This is A State of Control, episode number 2, brought to you by the fine folks at AVNation. My name is Tim Albright. I'm your host. With us this week, this month, this episode is Steve Greenblatt. He is the founder and the chief everything at Control Concepts. How are you, sir?
Great. How are you?
Doing well. Also with us is Dan Worth. Dan is the Director of Design Services at Varix Corporation. Hello, Dan.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. Also is Julia Cooper. She is a control systems programmer and engineer for AVI-SPL. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you.
And last but not least is Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa. He is from Fregosa Design, fregosadesign.com in beautiful San Francisco, California.
Uncle Richie's happy to be here. Uncle Richie shall spend the entire show speaking only in third person.
Jeez. Okay, you know what? It's only 9 o'clock in the morning in California. You can't be drunk Uncle Richie yet.
It has been a St. Patrick's Day weekend.
Oh, well,
this is true. An Irish girl.
I'm sorry. All right. This month we're going to talk about control, yes, but also control companies and how they have diverted and divested some of their, not divested, but expanded their product lines and how that may or may not affect the industry, right? I mean, not just when it comes to Crestron and Shades, which is, if you've ever listened to any AV Weeks, is an area that I like to poke fun at the fine folks from New Jersey. But, AMX and video and Extron and everything else. But let's kind of kick this off. Steve, here's the thing. You've got, let's say that you have AMX and Crestron, right? Not to single out them or eliminate any other people in the control part of the industry, but can we agree that they are the marquee or kind of the one that everybody shoots at?
Yeah, I would say so. On the commercial side
on the
of
commercial
things,
side, yes.
I would say that they're the leaders for sure.
Okay, so both of them over the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years have gone from being really great control companies to be still being really great control companies, but also getting into other things, whether that's speakers or video systems, the Shades, like I said, with Crestron. Is it them taking their eye off the ball of what they already do really well, or is it maybe the fact that they already do this really well and they see this as an area, it's a natural progression in their evolution as a company?
Well, I think it could be argued from both sides. From a programmer standpoint, I think that it makes life, I would say, a little bit more difficult because I think the more things that have the Crestron or AMX name on them, the more we are responsible for when we get into a system. It just ends up being the case. But of course, having more components and having more compatibility and having more of that same quality, as long as they can maintain it, has a lot of value. And I could see that being an important thing for a designer who, for the right customer, is looking to go one place and have one point of contact and one number to call for support. And they do a lot of work to help you design their systems with their products. I do feel like that does have value, but of course, with that evolution comes some shortcomings.
Julia, in the show notes and in talking beforehand, we talked about, does this make integrating other people's products less attractive? Does it make it more difficult for integrators and for end users to use somebody else's video switcher or somebody else's shades or somebody else's speakers when these companies who we want for our control companies start getting into these other areas?
Well, the only place I've found that it's more difficult is when the control company doesn't want to have a module, say, for one of their competitors. And that is the case with one of those control companies and another lighting company. So I haven't seen it across the board, but I think it's important that they still play nice with all the other vendors that we have been controlling for years.
Dan, Julia uses the term "play nice," and I would agree with that. It's important that they do. However, is that their responsibility to play nice? Is it more the more that they get into lighting and the more they get into other areas? Does that responsibility more fall on guys like you and Rich and Julia and Steve to make this work? Because you know what, they don't care if you use somebody else's speaker because they want you to use theirs.
Well, I'm not sure entirely that responsibility ends up falling on us. I think it ends up going back on the original equipment manufacturer, the lighting company that Julia referenced. That if the control company isn't going to produce the modules for them, then and the lighting company wants to sell into a market where that control manufacturer is the predominant interface to the user, if they want to get used, they're going to have to provide the modules themselves rather than rely on those, which I know that in some cases they've had to do. I don't think that the cost structure of some of the projects that we all work on are going to enable us to come up with custom modules on a single project by single project basis to support some of these guys.
Rich, we've talked about, like Dan says, this doesn't necessarily fall on you guys. It also doesn't fall on the original control manufacturer. It's more comes back on the other guys, on the third parties. One comment that has been made to me by one of the control manufacturers is that it gives you one person to blame, right? It gives you one company to point the finger at, as it were. Because you know what, I'm buying everything from you guys, and so I really only have one person to complain to. Is that a good argument when it comes to this is why you should buy put all your eggs in one basket, as it were, because it gives me one person to blame?
It's kind of one of those Godfather lines. It's like, it's not personal, this is business. I mean, the easiest customer to sell to is the one that you've already got, and I think that. And I mean, we saw this happen, 15 years ago. I mean, originally, Amex and Crestron, they were control companies, I mean, you flipped you hit forward on a slide projector. You threw a couple of relays and life was good by cracky. And then what happened, like Crestron is a perfect example. One day they decided, as the residential market was growing, Crestron made a surround processor. And next thing we knew, Crestron was making amplifiers, and then they were making distributed audio. Because what they found is that they were already in the market, they were already being sold into this market, and why should they give the revenue to another company? And I think always the assumption has been we're supporting the dealer base, as third-party programmers, which a lot of us are, but I know AVI is also a dealer, right? So. They're supporting the people who are actually selling the hardware that's going in. They're, hopefully making or increasing the profit margin of those dealers, or they're making it easier for the specifier. I mean, again, I've been on all sides of the table as a specifier, as an integrator, and as a consultant and programmer. And from the specifier side, for me, if I can just go ahead and go to one web page or go to one bill of materials and be able to say, okay, amplifier, check. Speakers, check. Control processor, check. And just keep going down this line without having to deal with the constant specs and the updates and everything else that goes. It's the money move that these manufacturers are going to take. So, Philosophically, do I agree with it? Not really, because I've always been the fan of kind of the best of breed solution. I think you select the best companies for the job needed. You don't necessarily pick something just because they happen to be somebody who provides it for you. And so it's a real fine line at that point. Because what winds up happening, like you were talking about the shades argument. It's been a running joke is that, well, great, you're now doing this. What are we going to get blenders next? What's the next fad that we're going to see that these manufacturers are going to get involved in?
Only if they can make the argument that adds to the smart building technology. Yes, you'll get blenders.
Yes, it is a green automated blender.
Well, what? Hang on for a second. No, don't. Let's not. Yes, we're making fun of the blender, but one of the press releases that we all got, what was it, 6-9 months ago, was the fact that they can control your oven now.
Yeah.
Crestron. Let's be specific here. So it's not you're putting your tongue firmly in your cheek, but you're not far off, are you?
No, I'm not. And the whole thing is that even the title of the show, it's a state of control. We're dealing now in the software world. There's the big line that a pretty famous venture capitalist has been saying is that software is eating the world, and that's really true. Is that all of the hardware based functions that we were doing, software is taking it over. And I think what's happening is manufacturers are seeing that and saying, we can't necessarily quantify our revenue based on a software model. So we got to sell as much of this physical stuff as we can to be able to use it. I mean, it's their Trojan horse. And I mean, that's the way that I look at it, is that, are you really buying a speaker? No, you're buying a Crestron speaker, or you're buying X company's speaker, or are you buying a switcher? Nah, not necessarily. You're buying their brand. You're buying into their cult of personality. So once you get in, and again, in the commercial market, if you do the executive boardroom or if you do the main headquarters, there's going to be satellite offices. So are you going to deviate from it and do one-offs like Dan was talking about? No. You're going to go ahead and you're going to try to keep everything consistent. I think that's my feeling as to what these manufacturers are doing. They're saying, hey, look, we got to get in. And once we get in, we got to stay in. And so we're just going to keep releasing these things that people say, if you made this, we wouldn't have to use this, or we'd be able to increase our order. And, maybe over the thought of maybe one project, you don't necessarily think about it. But if you think over, maybe a large multinational company that has thousands of offices and boardrooms, it's not a small piece of change.
Well, if you'd stop telling them that, they'd stop doing it. So, Dan, let me ask you this: when it comes to, Rich is right, as guys like you and Julie and Rich and Steve, and even guys like me, my real job is I'm a pseudo end user. I'm a technology manager for an education institution. Guys like us and guys like you tell them, hey, if you just did this, then we could only write one PO to run company. It'd be great. Does that facilitate proprietary systems? Does that facilitate, all-in-one systems, which is really great, and it all has AMX, the entire, you walk into the classroom, it all says AMX, it all says Crestron or Extron or Aurora or whoever. However, does that lead more to a all-in-one basket and less standards and more proprietary? Proprietary? I don't know.
Well, I think it didn't have to, but that's where we ended up. I think that I think what enabled a lot of this was the rollout of digital video is what really did it. All the HD-based T-type solutions from Crestron, AMX, Extron, and others. Along with that, somehow they all snuck in their own proprietary layer that locked them into source to display signal chains that enabled them to build these proprietary systems around which the for lack of a better word, tentacles of the control system grew out of just a processor and a touch panel into switching and now in some cases audio processing and all these other places where other manufacturers tended to reside. And now they and there are no non-proprietary solutions to these problems that we have of long distance signal chains.
Yeah. Well, and Steve, Dan makes a good point. All of these guys are doing their own thing. Some of them are based on existing stuff like HD base T. Some of it's not, right? So are we getting to a point where if you want this solution, you either are going to have to pick chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry at the beginning of your digital transition, or you're going to be looking to change, your entire infrastructure if you decide to change companies down the line?
Well, I guess it's kind of scary if you think of it that way, but that's where we are right now, and that's where whether it's reality or whether it's a selling point, but it seems to be the way you can really believe that the solution is going to work is go from the start to the end. And build that infrastructure, and I guess that is a good selling point for believing in one of these backbones. Back years ago, before this was the case, it was more of the resource management solution that you were looking to put in, and whether it was RoomView or RMS or Extron's Global Viewer, that was what sold you, and then that was where you where you made your investment, and then you just kept putting in more systems that supported it.
So let me ask you this: when I guess the question is you better, how much homework do you have to do before you pull that switch? Because let's be honest, none of these asset management, the big ones, the one you have to pay for, the server-based ones, are inexpensive. They're not cheap. So how do you come up with that solution? And should there be some mechanism in place at the corporate level, meaning the Jersey, Texas, California level, that says, you know what, we're going to give you X amount of dollars discount if you switch your asset management system?
I think that's probably happening as we speak.
Really?
But I'd have to believe that it probably hasn't been looked at that way, honestly, because the asset management, I think, was a successor to having these satellite systems in place, and then they brought in the resource management software that tied it all in, and that's when they locked you, I think, and maybe in the future we need to look at things more globally. What type of infrastructure do you want? And these are the pros and cons, and with RoomView comes digital media, and with RMS comes the AMX digital solution, and I guess maybe the clients need to start looking at things from 1,000-foot view more than looking at it on a individual room basis.
Well, Rich, and it's something that I didn't realize, I didn't even anticipate taking this left turn, which was the asset management part, in talking about the proprietary stuff. But how do you go about saying, you know what, this is the standard, quote unquote, and I'm using the small s version of that because Steve and Dan are right.
The great thing about standards.
I know, there's so many of them. But here's the thing, though. All kidding aside about standards, the nice thing about standards is it allows you to change course midstream without ripping out all of your infrastructure, right? The thing, yeah. if you want to go down the DM pathway or the Crestron, twisted pair, the Crestron HD version, you go down that path, that's where you're going, and if you want to change to Aurora or AMX or Kramer or whoever, you're pulling things out that cost thousands of dollars.
I kind of keep going back to this and my feeling that, our industry, we're passionate about what we do, but our industry still as a whole is kind of in this really awkward adolescence, especially our segment of the industry. And, I've said several times, I really think that our industry is about 20 years behind the curve of what the PC and the IT industry went through. This is no different 20 years ago than if you decided you were doing a 10-base T network, literally, a T-tap network with RG59. And then there wound up being the big discussion of, well, do you do the coax, you do go this newfangled twisted pair? And there were huge decisions that were made in the networking world. It's no different than what we're talking about now. It's hardware manufacturers who are completely vested in saying, this is our way. We're going to do it the way we're going to do it. And obviously nobody knows how we do it better than we do. And at that point, you basically have these rival factions. I mean, there's a couple of us, Steve operates as Switzerland. I do too. We're kind of agnostic. We're like, hey, man, whatever's going to get the job done, we're happy to go ahead and support. I mean, we'll support, I'll provide the bullets to anybody, just tell me which ones. And I think that with the manufacturers right now is that because it is still focused on this hardware-centric view, these boxes, these thousands and thousands and thousands upon dollar boxes, that they're saying, again, the writing's on the wall. They've got to sell as much of this stuff as they can now, because that market will change within the next few years. We're already starting to see it. We're seeing it happen in the video conferencing world, and I think to be so oblivious to the fact that that's where our industry is going to, I think that's, it's sometimes one of the unspokens. Why are they trying to go the proprietary route? Why are they saying we're going to lock you in now? Because when they do release the virtual version of whatever we do, they want to be able to sell it to their existing client base. So they go all out right now. And I think personally that's what's kind of leading it, which is if you can be the one-stop solution now, when you do the next version rollout, it's a much easier sell if you go to a licensing model or a software-based model, or if a software as a service model. And again, the hardware is the way to get them now to be able to, because the pitch is, hey, when this changes, because we have this standard that we're trying to keep going for the next 10 years, we'll just be able to upgrade you. And the facilities people or, whoever happens to be the committee that you're selling to, they don't do what we do. That's why we're hired in the first place.
Yeah.
So at that point, there is some instances of kind of the luck of the draw, which is, who's the company who was selected in the first place? The company who was selected hopefully is going to take the objective measure, which is why specifiers are around, to say, based on what you say in your use cases are, these are the guys who are going to do it. We're going to educate you on the process, and then you pick. Now, if it's an integrator with a design build, the integrator has a vested has a vested interest in saying, hey, look, these are my guys. This is why I use them. I'm using them, and you're picking me because you like me. And it sometimes really is that basic. In some projects. I mean, I think we tend to think at times when we're dealing with companies that we're dealing with just these large entities. There's still people on the other side, and you are still championing your own cause to these individuals. And if you can get through to that individual who's ultimately making the decision, that's really what I think these manufacturers are doing. They're saying, here you go. Here are all the tools that you need in order to be able to say, I can do this for you. This is why I'm your person. Please sign the PO.
Please sign the PO.
Please sign the PO. I mean, I'd like to be able to take a much, higher 30,000-foot view of the comings and goings, but I really think it's that basic at times.
Well, and you're probably right. It does. And here's the thing. In business in general, it does kind of come down to people and relationships. So you're right in that aspect. You are listening to A State of Control. We did have Julia Cooper. She is still a control systems programmer with AVI-SPL, but she's also in D.C., and apparently the sequester has turned off the internet. So
the drones have taken all the cellular, all the signal out in the area.
She is awfully close to Jersey, and so probably the Crestron labeled drones came and destroyed her internet.
I'm next.
You are next, Steve. Although with us
not far away either.
Is Steve? Good Lord, it's just going to be me and Rich, which would not be a bad show. Steve Greenblatt from Controls Concepts, Dan Worth from Varex Corporation, and of course, everybody's drunk Uncle Richie from Fregosa.
Everybody has to have a drunk Uncle Richie.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Steve. So let me ask you one question. I'll ask you more than that because we have some time to fill. One of the pitches that I have been given, again, I'm a technology manager, so I get a different pitch than you guys do, is the fact that, you know what, in reality, there's only like 2 or 3 speaker manufacturers in the world, and everything else is just, our individual specs. So there's only a handful of video processor manufacturers in the world, or, lighting ballasts in the world. So we're all kind of getting the same stuff anyway. So what does it matter if, you go ahead and buy our stuff because our stuff's as good as JBL or EV or, some other product? Is there validity? Is there validity there?
I see. I don't design systems, but I would have to believe that it depends. Which is an easy out. But there are probably systems where there are not specific needs, and you can get away with a multitude of different types of devices. However, I'm sure that there are specialized either applications or systems or room with a certain type of acoustics that really you need particular devices that are going to be the best fit, and you may be making some sacrifices by not considering other options.
That's a very good answer, actually. It's not a cop out. It does depend. Dan, is Steve right though? Does it depend on the use case, or a classroom is a classroom is a classroom, and an 8-inch speaker is an 8-inch speaker?
Well, I think he is right that it does depend, as with a lot of things in our industry. But I think the ability to manufacture, if we take the speaker as an example, the ability to manufacture a loudspeaker that is quote unquote good enough for many applications, be it the conference room, the classroom, the various meeting rooms, has gotten inexpensive enough that many of the products out there can fill the role, as well as a marquee name like a JBL or an EV or a Tannoy or something like that. So a loudspeaker from a company who doesn't necessarily have the background in sound like an Extron or a Crestron can come in and fill the bill at a lower price point. And maybe some of us who are a little more critical at how it sounds might not like it. It serves the need for the people who are going to use it. So, and at a lower price often. So that's what's happening.
Well, and Rich, he makes a good point where there is a price point difference with a lot of these guys when it comes to let's pick on speakers for example. You put some of these classroom-based speakers, these smaller form factor speakers into a classroom, they all sound just to an untrained, uncritical ear, they would probably sound similar. They would sound real close to each other. So is that where it comes down to where, the college president can't tell the difference and they're $300 cheaper, so it makes sense to go with the Control Systems branded speakers?
Yeah, for me, I mean that just goes against every philosophy that I have. But there's the tortured artist in me, and then there's the businessman in me. And
we'll speak to both.
Yeah,
well, I think if I could just real quick, I think everybody on this call and probably most people listening would agree with with that same sentiment. But we're often not the buyers.
Oh no, and that's exactly it. I mean, again, it's I have the luxury of being able to sell speakers that cost $50,000, amplifiers that cost $30,000. I mean, I sell these. These are my passion. So yeah, when I'm looking at a conference room, or I'm looking at a secondary listening location or something, and the choice is, well, these that are optimized for use, and the bezel's great, and they're warranted for 20 years, et cetera, and they cost $1,000. But here's this Chinese OEM version that we've got that are $65, and if you got 50 classrooms, well, that's going to make a difference. That's going to add up, and at that point, like the guys were saying, yeah, does it depend? Yeah. And it's not a cop-out. I mean, that's just how it works. And I think, the people listening are, also kind of shaking their head going, yeah, it is how it works. Does it suck? Yeah, I'd like to do more. I'd like to make it better because, again, we know what it could be. And I think that's always what you wind up coming up against is, as the expert, quote unquote, little quotes brought in, to optimize whatever is the deliverable, there's some pride. There's some pride in craftsmanship and in our artistry, and like, hey, this is what I've delivered. And even though you don't know it, you can appreciate it. You don't necessarily know what great sound is, but you probably know what bad sound is. So if I can get you closer to the great sound, you're going to appreciate it more. And things like with audio is tough because you do have to experience it. You can't sell the visceral experience of audio on a spreadsheet. It just doesn't translate. So, at that point, that's when it starts going to salesmanship, I think, as opposed to the technical side of things. And can you create an environment where they can justify the expense? I think when you're dealing with just kind of the X and O's or, somebody who's crunching numbers and counting beans, that's a pretty hard, it's a pretty tough uphill battle. So, yeah, you do have to have kind of the cost-effective version. You cut your losses and you move on to the stuff that that ultimately they're going to be able to, when you bring in the whole group of people into the room and, you cut the little ribbon, everybody goes, wow, look at our new system. And, kind of the wow factor stuff. Yeah, because the whole point is obviously you want to do more of these. So you're going to try to get what you can out of it and get the biggest impact for it. And a lot of times sound being the perfect example, I think that's the one thing that winds up suffering, which, it just makes me grit my teeth because they're organisms unto themselves. It's the whole collective thing. And the manufacturers are saying, look, we're not going to fight you on this one. The thing that makes me crack up, though, that I think about now is, say Crestron, whoever comes out with their speaker, well, how are they going to fight against Monoprice if they decide they're going to come out with the same speaker? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, no, ours, everybody makes the OEM. I keep thinking it's like, well, how are you going to react when your own argument is used against you? And that's what I'm waiting for.
Okay, so let's take it away from speakers because obviously Uncle Richie has a very strong opinion about that. I'm just
at least I didn't get drunk and belligerent this time.
I'm poking fun. But, okay, so let's take it away from something where there are artistic differences, right? And I will agree with you. You and my buddy Michael and Joe and everybody, every guy every person that I know that is an audiophile and does this, you guys have much more sensitive ears than I do, and I lean on you when it comes to stuff like this. Let's talk about projector mounts. Okay, there is more than one company that does control systems that also sell mounts. Dan, is there a darn bit of difference between the metal that one Tron or another or one company or another will sell when it comes to projector mounts, and does it matter then at that point who they come from?
If you have an uphill battle selling your user on the difference between loudspeaker A and loudspeaker B, it's a much steeper hill battle trying to sell them on the difference between mount A and mount B. They don't care for the most part. The people who do care are us, the users who install it, and our field people who have to put them in. And often then it becomes more about what you're used to. And yes, there is some differences about the ability to get the image just right through simple adjustment versus possibly having to put in some shims or something where somebody else's mount could give you just the right amount of tilt to get to compensate for something being out of square in the construction of the space. So but I think those differences are getting narrower and narrower.
Doesn't one of the manufacturers give you like 6 pennies that you can just tape to the back of the projector just to balance it out a little bit?
Yeah,
I haven't seen that in a while.
I'm not going to say who. Steve, is there? Okay, so we've been poking fun at these guys for a while. Is there a product maybe that we can think of that doesn't matter? Whoa, that was interesting. Where it doesn't matter who we use, right? It doesn't matter when it comes to whether it's mounts or whether it comes to cabling or whether it comes to something else. Is there a product maybe that we could agree on that it doesn't matter whose name is on the cover?
I mean, not one really that I'm in touch with. The stuff that we deal with and that I'm more involved with are more of the customized pieces of equipment that and along the lines. One of the things that I have to evaluate when we do something which contributes to this discussion is we have to look at control capability versus the performance. And when when you're selecting a piece of equipment, it's very hard for somebody to see the control side of things, because really the performance is what they appreciate. And a lot of times the magic is the programming that makes it easy to use. But one thing that, if we just take things in a little bit of a different direction, is I'm curious to see how things are going to pan out with the idea of Crestron coming out with some video conferencing capabilities now, and how now they're going to go up against a real install base on both Polycom and Cisco, that you already have companies that have adopted one or the other, or potentially both, and that's when things are going to get a little interesting.
Well, Steve makes a good point, and what he's talking about is the DMPS 300 with AEC, with AES, not just going up against Cisco or Polycom, but also companies like Biamp, who have made inroads into getting into these installed systems when you need some sort of echo canceling features. Are they going up against these guys on purpose? I mean, is that the deal, or are they just seeing this as another revenue line?
I think it's just another front for them another piece of the pie for them to grab hold of, just like they did with video switching, like they're doing with the signal path infrastructure. It's just the next frontier for them. And then behind that, as Steve said, is possibly the video calling as well. I haven't seen how well it performs. I imagine maybe the first gen might be a little slow, but I've watched Crestron iterate quickly. Especially when the DM first came out, it had some hiccups, but it came through. And I imagine maybe on the audio side they'll do the same thing. I think if they can do it well and cheaply, I shouldn't say cheaply, but inexpensively, there's a real threat there to Biamp and Clear One and the sound structure from Polycom. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Rich, this AEC, one thing that has been told to me, because we did the story a couple weeks ago on AV Week, was that what you're going to have is because you cannot have two cancellation mechanisms, right?
Right.
So what they're going to do is either push out these other companies, the Polycoms and Clear One and Life Size's AEC, or are they going to? Okay, I'm not trying to give Randy Klein any more ideas, but are they going to video conferencing? I mean, is this something where this is a precursor maybe to Crestron getting into VTC?
Well, let's just use Crestron as an example. Let's just start with that.
Yeah, because we're talking about the DMPS.
Yeah, AEC. They're going to try new stuff, and they're going to try the market. They're also willing to go ahead and bet on something, and if it doesn't pan out, to kind of say, all right, we tried. Prodigy. Right?
There was nothing wrong with Prodigy.
No, but it didn't fill the market. They didn't leverage the market the way that they had planned to. And ultimately they got to the point and said, you know what? It's not working out. They went back to a core competency. So there's nothing wrong with trying, I guess that's what I'm saying. And I think that's what they're saying too, is that if we have the engineering power, if we already have the chassis, which is they already spent a whole lot of time developing this all-in-one box and went through a whole ton of growing pains with it. This is not, the DMPS is a year and a half old now, year old.
The DMPS is about a year old. They started shipping about a year ago.
Yeah.
I think it was January, February, somewhere in there.
With significant growing pains.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened now is they've said, okay, we've kind of, we've gone through the maiden voyage of this. Here are the things that we can do iterations on. And if by any chance with, basically the chassis that we've built and now we've kind of OEM'd this product, if we can add some extra things onto it, so much the better. I mean, I think it's just an evolution of what they've done with their control processors. They've said, we're already in there. We're already doing, 3/4 of the purposes that you need inside a conference room. And we have these two other companies who are doing things. Well, we can do that. And I think that's really what they're saying is that, for X amount more, if you want to stick in the whole box. I mean, that's the whole point behind the DMPS in the first place, wasn't it? A centralized processor and switcher.
Yeah, it was all in one.
Right. So, as an example, with this box, I see it being, just an evolution of saying, okay, we can do this. We've already spent the engineering time and the people on it. We can expand on it. And then I think they're going to find out how the market reacts to it. They may sell a boatload of these. They may not. I mean, I think constantly they're looking at, what can be a home run like DM is. Again, they're kind of still looking. If you're not swinging, if you're not trying hard, you're not winning. I think that's what they're doing at this point.
Steve, what does that do with their relationship with not just integrators, but also with other companies? I mean, one thing that Crestron has are these integration modules, and what it is companies like Samsung and Sharp and it used to be Polycom at one point. They have integrated modules, right? And they have they where they work with Polycom to build these little plug and play modules for these third party products. What does that do to that relationship, or does it do anything?
I think Julia alluded to it earlier. It really strains the relationship if not closes the door on the relationship. And what ends up happening is that companies like ours or other integrators or third parties have to either develop them on their own for their particular project. So they pick the products that they want to work with, and they say, okay, we're going to develop these modules so that we have them so that we can use them for our projects. Or the manufacturers have to go and seek programmers to work with, assuming they have some sort of a relationship where that's permitted to be able to have the Crestron software or AMX software and hire somebody to develop modules for them. But those modules are really the key to doing projects. I mean, I've kind of said that for a long time, that it's the only way to keep projects within budget, and it's an investment. And talking about it in the future about source code ownership, that's where the intellectual property is.
Is the intellectual property is how you make all these disparate systems work together, right?
Well, it's the module, I think, that really is the magic that allows you to talk to the device. And of course, there's the programming that pulls it all together that allows you to make a custom solution for a particular installation. But there's only so many variables and variations on that. It's the hard part many times is talking to the device and developing that module that is trusted and proven and rock solid, and also provides you with all of the functions that you would need for many different applications.
Well, let's be honest here. It's an authorized module, right? I mean, when you get it from AMX or Crestron's website, and there's a certain understanding there that this has been vetted, right? And when I buy it from you or from someone else, as much as I may like you, Steve, you don't have that official stamp of approval, right?
Well,
besides the fact that you have certain certifications and things of that nature, but your module did not come from New Jersey.
Absolutely, you're correct, and there are of course some guidelines, and of course there's some that can be close, but yes, it wouldn't be the official one. Yeah. So there is a difference there for sure, and for the control manufacturers to sell their substituted products in each of these cases where they have where they are staking their claim and they have the competition on the ropes, kind of, because if control is what's important to you, they're going to tell you, and it's probably the case, that it's going to be a lot easier to control a like brand than this third party that may or may not have an authorized module.
All right, Dan, when it comes to all of these wonderful integrated, everybody's, I'm using a Crestron projector and a Crestron screen and a Crestron control system and a Crestron speaker and So help me if they come out with those, I'm going to sue them. That was a joke. But when it comes to all of that, and they're using, where it's an all-in-one system, how does that affect the end user? How does that affect the corporate head who, because we've said this before, they don't care, right, whose nameplate is on that. But how does that affect them in the long run? Or does it affect them? Does it not really matter? And the effect really is between the integrator or the programmer and the company.
Well, I think what is likely to happen or could happen is we end up with less flexibility in some of the things that can be done by the systems, which traditionally is, I think, to a large extent where many of us kind of live in being able to produce a system that does all the things the client wants. So the client A says, I want a system and it can do X, Y, and Z. If they're locked in on Crestron and it only does X and Y, kind of our hands are tied. If it has to be these components from a single vendor, then the client gets locked into only what that system can support, and maybe there are some features that they want that are just not possible in a all-in-one solution. Which you'll often see is, I think, if one is to compare other markets to something like a Honda versus a Toyota. Anybody who's done comparative shopping on those, you can go to Toyota and you can pick off all these different features in your car that you want. Sometimes they get bundled in, but you have this big long menu, and that's kind of where we were. And in these all-in-one systems, you're heading more towards how Honda sells things, where it's a package. If you want something, it comes only inside of this one package, and comes with all these other things. And if you want something we don't offer, well, you have to add it yourself somehow through another means, but we're not going to support that. There's some parallels that can be drawn to Apple in that regard as well, where the integration of the hardware and software has led to very tight control over what the final product can do by the single vendor.
Rich, that lack of flexibility, does that hurt end users in the long run, or is it just when they want to shift gears?
It's funny is that, just kind of talking about this, it kind of made me start thinking, does this, the argument could be made is that the dealers and the integrators for these manufacturers were almost being inadvertently punished for not selling their product at that point. That's kind of, for me, it's almost started, I started thinking about it for a minute going, gosh, if I don't sell this and, it's now you've just absolutely burnt the bridge with this manufacturer who I work with. And now it's going to cost me money to go ahead and bridge those two together, which then I have to pass on to the client. Well, the client's going to want to go with the single solution because I'm going to have to tell them, hey, in order to make these two work, it's going to cost you an extra 40 hours of my time because they don't want to play with each other. So, at that point, like you were saying, does the end user suffer? I think it can. I think it's down the line. It would be a trickle effect because, again, I can't use these two products now. I have to advise against it potentially because I need to follow the path of least resistance, which is, I really don't want to get into this discussion. So let's just stick with this because if I do get into the discussion, it opens up a whole can of worms that in order to make these two work together, it's going to take an extra week of my time. I have to charge you for that, or worse, I have to eat it and hope that I can amortize it over the course of X projects. But again, still somebody's going to pay that non-recurring engineering cost. And again, this is being geared towards control programmers and integrators. This is our money at that point that is potentially going. So do we become less profitable? And the Apple, the Apple example is perfect. We don't make money on iPads. We don't make money on iPhones or iPod Touches or any of these. But now they are almost a necessary part of any of these projects that come in. That is an entire portion of the income stream that's gone that makes the end user, gives them some flexibility. But in terms of the people who provide the products, it potentially phases us out or puts our business models in jeopardy. And I think that if you're going to go to a single solution as a control company, and this is what we're talking about, my feeling is that you kind of need to be agnostic. You need to you have to hope that they still want to operate in good faith with all of the people that they play in the sandbox with. And I think time will tell how some of these other manufacturers react. There's the most famous one with the unnamed lighting company. Yeah. So somebody said, "Fine, we'll do it our way," and that's it. And it makes it difficult for people who are caught in the middle. It's like, I hate it when mom and dad fight.
Well, and that, you know what? There is something to that, Rich, because I've been told more than one story from more than one person about. There's a reason that years ago it used to be you put in one brand of video switcher and you put in another brand of control company, and when the one stepped over the line and started doing what the other did, well, then the other company did the same, and suddenly that's what you have. 20 years ago you had one brand of switcher and you had one brand of control company, and when one day you woke up and suddenly one was doing what the other one did, it's like, oh, okay, let's do it too. And you're right, we get caught in the middle when mom and dad fight.
The other question is too is if you take a look at it, and we're focusing mostly from the control standpoint, but if you look at it from, let's say, an Extron standpoint, where they made great switchers and interfaces and so forth, and they had a really strong following. Does their control take a back seat to that? And which one is the most important part? Is if they made the best switcher out there, would that bring their control into projects, or is it the control that is what brings the switchers and other components into projects?
Well, what happened with AutoPatch? I mean, did their sales increase or decrease after AMX acquired them? I mean, AutoPatch was one of the best of breed solutions out there in the early 90s, to circa 2000s. I mean, if you were doing switching, you were doing AutoPatch.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a good question, and I don't know, that we can find that out because
that's a good question.
Right, but that's what I'm talking about, is that it's almost like this arms race is escalating, and again, it follows the tech industry. The tech industry has grown through acquisitions. As we're entering into our adolescence as an industry, that's what we're seeing more and more of. They're taking the, if you can't beat them, buy them,
or not buy them, do what they do.
Right.
And put them out of business, or at least marginalize them. So.
Right. And now, but Steve, and you guys made a good point. Potentially, as we're going down, now you're pointing a stick. Now you're starting to try to pick on the big kids. And if the big kids decide to slug you back, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
I think too, in the tech industry, especially in the networking side, early on, there was a large push to get things into a standard so you didn't have to use manufacturers' A's switches for your network infrastructure. I mean, that was probably the early situation, not being a networking guy. But now, I can use an HP switch and a Cisco switch and these different switches because 802.11 kind of leveled the playing field and made them all talk to each other. It feels like right now there's nothing driving the current crop of big guys, the big three largely, and with some smaller ones also, to do this, to be able to say, I want to have Extron on my wall plate, I want to have Crestron as my switch, I want to have AMX deliver the signal to my projector. You can't do it. It's not an option that's out there that even if we wanted to, we could pursue.
But I mean, again, we see this with Infocom, is that there's been recommendations. I mean, and there's been rallying of troops of it, but I think the reason is that the manufacturers don't have to.
No,
exactly. There's no reason for them to.
There's no compelling reason for them to have to. And then in the tech industry, there was a lot more dollars at play, and there was a lot more users in play. And I think our industry is still small enough that the guys who are making the parts still have a whole lot more leverage over the guys who are selling the parts. And unless that shift occurs where the user and the integrator can say, look, you got a choice. You either sell what we want and you play well with others, or you're going to go ahead and phase yourself out. And I don't think our industry is at a point that we can rally together and dictate to these manufacturers that they should play with each other. And that's the big problem. That's the Achilles heel, is that we're following on the crumbs that our manufacturers are giving us, and we're saying thank you, sir. May I have another?
Well, and that comes back to just sheer size of people, right? I mean, we don't have hundreds of thousands or millions of AV professionals, right? We don't have the equivalent of what the IT industry has when it comes to numbers. We just don't. I mean, we don't. For as many Cisco certified people, there's for every 10 or 20 of those, there might be one CTS, and I might be generous when I say that.
I think to a large degree the disparity between the size of the manufacturers relative to the size of the integrators and the consultants is much larger than it was in the tech industry. The disparity between the suppliers and the purchasers.
All right, well, grab your pitchforks, guys. I am the 1%.
I'm the 1%.
Or I'm the 99%. Wait, I always get that wrong. Which one am I?
No, Rich.
We're the 1% at the bottom.
Rich, I know you. You are the 1%. All right, guys. We're gonna wrap this up with a kind of a final word, a preview. Your 2 cents on where you think this thing's gonna go and where do you think this thing's gonna land. Steve, we'll kick it off with you. Are we in an arms race, like Rich said? And if we are, then where does this end?
I sure hope that we can continue to deliver creative solutions, and I feel like we're moving toward the emphasis on more and more on the user experience, and I think that in order to deliver the best user experience, we need to be able to make choices. So I feel like that we shouldn't put up the walls that used to exist. We should continue to keep them, keep the that maybe they've grown a little bit, but keep them from cutting us off from the partnerships and the versatility and the thought that we still have third party control.
Steve says, "Tear down this wall." Dan, where
Mr.
do we?
Feldstein,
Yeah. Dan, where are we going to end up with this arms race here?
Obviously, that's difficult to say. I think that in the end, what matters is how do we as an industry serve our clients and our end users. If all of this all-in-one solution and this integration into common single platform type stuff, in the end, serves our client better than disparaging suppliers and control systems, then it can be a good thing, even though there will probably be a number of bodies littering the roadway along the way. But if it does, that's what has to matter, though. Do we provide a better solution to the users in doing so? Sometimes we do. I think sometimes it may not be the solution, but I think that's what has to drive everything.
All right, Uncle Richie, give me your break open your crystal ball and tell me how this thing's going to end.
I think it's going to go one of two ways. Either kind of everybody just kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, what are you going to do? Or somebody is absolutely just going to fight back and punch them right in the mouth. And I think if that happens, I think it will create some fundamental changes in our industry. Because at that point, they might call in their bigger tech brother and said, hey, come beat this guy up for me. Again, we keep talking within ourselves of our industry. There's always the possibility that somebody much bigger, much larger in an affiliated industry decides that they're going to get into what we're doing, or they're going to get into what they're doing and say, hey, by the way, we just acquired Biamp. What are you going to do now? And it only takes it's one press release away at that point from it being, a schoolyard fight.
Or, like I predicted a couple years ago, Cisco will buy Control4. Sorry.
Or, yes.
I'm still holding that out. But seriously, are you saying not just Cisco? Because let's be honest, that's the 10,000-pound gorilla in IT. But you think maybe it could possibly be a smaller player in what is already an existing control or video company?
Yeah, I would say somebody is affiliated. It could be a security company. I mean, there's a lot of different industries that could decide that, hey, we have the resources. Again, if you can't beat them, you buy them. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that couldn't say that it's out of the realm of possibility. Do I think it's going to happen in the next couple of years? No. I think that even in the state of our industry right now, I mean, if it doesn't happen in the next 3 years, I think it'll just be kind of like a little dust up. And what'll happen is that we'll be dealing with much bigger problems than trying to decide which, audio conferencing unit works best with which control processor. I think that we're going to be facing much stronger kind of enemies at the gates from the IT industry.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, sir. You have been listening to A State of Control. With us has been that gentleman there. His name is Rich Fregosa from Fregosa Design, fregosadesign.com. How can people find you, sir?
You can find me at fregosadesign.com, on Twitter at @rfregosa, and you can also catch me as a limited correspondent on CE Pro at cepro.com with our illustrious leader, Julie Jacobson.
Yay, Julie. Also with us has been Dan Worth. Dan is the Director of Design Services at Varix Corporation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Can anybody follow you, find you anywhere?
Not much on Twitter, but you can find me on LinkedIn, Daniel Worth, and also through the Varix website at Varix, VERREX.com.
Okay. Very good. And last but not least, we did have Julie Cooper on. She's a control systems programmer for AVI-SPL, but apparently she's in D.C., so the government cut her internet connection. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. But Steve Greenblatt has been here. He is from Control Concepts. How can people find you, sir?
You could find me on Twitter at Steve Greenblatt, or LinkedIn, also Steve Greenblatt, and my website, controlconcepts.net.
Very good. My name is Tim Albright. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, it is TD, Tim David Albright. But more importantly for me and everybody that does anything here at AVNation, please go by the website, avnation.tv. avnation.tv, you'll find this show, our weekly show, AV Week, as well as our other shows, education, live sound, and staging, and others as well. So go by the website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. This has been A State of Control.